Hey guys, I'm gonna start doing my film students' homework. Wanna see?
Focus.
As a professor, one of my responsibilities is to conceive of assignments for my students to complete. Assignments that will help them to better understand the language of cinema, how to employ that language, and why a specific use of that language is right for them as filmmakers and as storytellers. But I've been doing the same thing for roughly 7 years now. It's time to get out from behind the lectern, Hartwell. It's time to get out from behind the desk and plant myself where my students sit and actually try to accomplish these assignments that I assign to them for myself. Because I am very curious to see if I can complete them to the standard that I hold my students to, and also, probably more importantly, I am curious to see if they are as effective as I want them to be. Will I, in completing them, have a firmer grasp of the language of cinema? And finally, this sounds like a lot of fun. So let's do it, shall we?
That's gonna be fun. I like that show a lot already.
Now, being that this is a relatively small university and I sort of teach everything, I have a lot of classes to choose from. But I'm going to choose my personal favorite, that being directing, and I will choose assignment number 1. Now, this is an assignment that my students will actually do in class. I give them roughly an hour and a half to shoot this very short scene. Now, looking at the script, you'll see that it is incredibly simple. The reason being, in my estimation, the core of directing, the foundation atop everything else is laid, is realizing that my responsibility as a director is to first and foremost express my own voice through the language of cinema. Which begs the question, what exactly do I mean by voice? Well, what I mean by voice is what I say and how I say it. And giving the students this incredibly simple pared back script really puts them in the position to figure out, well, what do I have to say? What do I see in this particular very bare bones story? So this is the script that I will be shooting for this particular assignment. And so it reads. Interior room. A woman sits quietly on a couch. After a moment, a man enters the room. He stops when he sees the woman. The woman doesn't turn, seemingly unaware of his presence. The man opens his mouth to say something, but nothing comes out. He turns to go. Hi. The man looks back. He takes a breath, walks over, and sits down next to the woman. Hi. Not a whole lot, right? But I know you know that were this scene to be directed by Steven Spielberg, it would be dramatically different to the scene directed by David Lynch, which would be dramatically different to the scene directed by Ava DuVernay, which would be dramatically different to the scene shot by David Fincher, which would be dramatically different to the scene shot by Christopher Nolan. Same script, same words, completely different interpretation. Why? Because each of those directors possesses a very distinct voice and know how to express that voice using the language of cinema. So, let's see if I can do the same today. Before I jump into shooting though, I'm going to do some proper pre-production and ask myself the important question, that being, how do I find my voice? Well, one way is to look inside. Even if whatever bubbles to the surface feels silly, feels pretentious, feels different, I'm going to let it bubble up. Scorsese says, the most personal is the most creative. And I love this quote here from Coppola. It's one that I frequently need to tell to myself. I don't care if what I'm saying sounds pretentious or not. I'm just going to say it for me. So in looking at a script like this, or really any script, I will ask myself a series of questions to help kick up some of those beliefs, some of those thoughts, some of those opinions. The first thing being, what do I see? What do I actually see happening on the page? And from that, I will ask myself, what do I believe that relates to this thing that I'm seeing occurring? And then I will ask myself, do I have any experiences that in some way relates to what I'm seeing happening on the page and what I believe about what's happening on the page? And after that, I will ask myself, what really am I trying to say with this film? And finally, I will ask myself, how can I express these observations, these beliefs, these experiences in the simplest and most sincere way? So now I'm going to go back to our script and actually answer these 5 questions for myself. But before I do, if you're interested in completing this assignment yourself and maybe even sending me your work after you've completed it, maybe pause the video and answer them for yourself before you hear my answers. Now, I'm going to turn on some music, and go to my Sherlockian mind palace, and I think. I introspect. I look at this script and I ask myself, what do I see? Yes, it's so very bare bones, but if I really pay attention, if I really look, I will begin to hear the unspoken words of dialogue. I will begin to see the inarticulated motivations. I will be able to understand what this scene really is about, even while it's giving me so very little. So, what do I see? What do I see? Well, more than just a man and a woman. I see a husband and a wife struggling to say, I'm sorry. That's what I see. Again, it's not overtly there on the page. This is absolutely my interpretation, but this is what I see. Now, what beliefs do I have that relate to the observation? Well, when it comes to a husband and wife relationship, I truly believe that apologizing is essential for a healthy relationship. The next thing to ask is, do I have any experience relating to this observation and relating to this belief? And absolutely yes. I had been married for 8 years, and as you can imagine, have needed to so many times say, I am sorry to my wife. Now, based on that observation, that belief, those experiences, what am I trying to say? I think really what I'm trying to say is, though difficult, apologies are essential for a relationship to flourish. And finally, I need to ask myself, what is the simplest and most sincere way in which I can express this to my audience? Well, there are a number of things already beginning to swirl around in my mind. 2 of them are the position of the camera and the kind of camera movement that I use. So positionally, I like the idea of starting this film out from behind my characters, where we're not able to look them in the eye, to feel like we sincerely know them. So I like the idea of starting behind them, slowly moving into profiles, and ultimately concluding with a shot that looks straight on towards them. Camera movement-wise, I like the idea of starting things off handheld to help to visually illustrate that this relationship is unsettled, and then ultimately progressing to a place where the camera is locked down, it's secure, it's arrested, it's at peace when these characters are willing to look into one another's eyes and say, I'm sorry, or in this particular instance,
Hi.
Once you've asked those questions, you might think, all right, let's go, we're ready to rock and roll. But let me just pause you right there before we jump out and start filming stuff. After looking inside, I would also encourage you to look outside, because even while as you look inside, it will begin to fill in some of the detail, some of the color of what this project is about, its point of view, how you want to approach shooting it. But it will only add some of the color. And it's not until you look outside of yourself and begin to pull in other pieces of inspiration that you really begin to fill out the picture that's beginning to form in your mind of what this film ought to be. So where outside of yourself should you look? Well, there are innumerable places that you could look, but for me, being the cinephile that I am, the first place that I will often look are other films. To go back to Martin Scorsese again, he has this to say about watching films: know the old masters before you get into it. See if they speak to you. Now, it's worth asking, what films specifically should you watch? Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with starting with the films that you truly love. So for me, it's the original Star Wars trilogy, it's the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I like Star Wars, like a lot. Like a lot. So much so that I have an entire art book for The Rise of Skywalker. Like, that's how much I like it. And Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is great too. But also, challenge yourself. When I entered college, even while I might not have admitted it out loud, deep down, I really felt like the only films that I needed to really watch and study were the ones that I loved dearly already. But one of the best things I did for myself, I started to watch films that I hadn't yet watched, films that challenged me, films that were so different from the ones that I grew up loving and adoring. And it's because of that that I came across a trilogy like the Before trilogy, one that has absolutely informed me as an artist and as a storyteller. So being that we're filmmakers, do we only study films? Of course, the answer is no. There are so many other places that we can find inspiration. I love this quote from Terry Gilliam when he says, study something useful. Philosophy, history, English, learn to have thoughts. There are so many other wells into which we can pull inspiration and learn from. And so, from the films that I have observed, from the books that I have read, from the history that I have studied, from the people that I have watched, what other stories does this story remind me of? And what other characters do these characters remind me of? Something else that I ask myself is, what other images, what other light, what other colors that I've seen do I see in this story? And one brilliant resource that is so very helpful is shotdeck.com. Now, this video is not sponsored by ShotDeck, though it could be, but I will go there and I will begin to pull reference images just to inspire myself and my cinematographer, and these are a few of the reference images that I pulled for this particular film. I love the idea of an incredibly dim environment. I love the idea of some natural window light. I love the idea of some atmosphere in the air. Pretty much any environment is made to look 100 times cooler when you pump a bit of atmosphere into that environment.
Maybe fog and can dance.
But now that we've looked inside and we've looked outside, it's time to really become a director. And by that I mean we need to choose. And we need to choose intuitively. We need to respond intuitively. And what exactly do I mean by intuition? Well, I think Judith Weston defines it well in her book, The Film Director's Intuition, that being it's an idea that overtakes us without reason, or an action that we take without thinking, that turns out to be true. It is that knee-jerk reaction. It is just that pull towards, this feels right. I love what Rian Johnson has to say about this as well. You have to lay down your chips in front of a lot of very good poker players and say, this is the right direction, based on nothing but this little tingle that you get in your stomach. But the best shot that I have at making something good is to trust my gut. And Steven Spielberg agrees with them. At first, the internal voice that I needed to listen to was hardly audible, and it was hardly noticeable. But then I started paying more attention and my intuition kicked in. Now, even while I absolutely agree with Judith Weston, Rian Johnson, Steven Spielberg, here's the rub. Your intuition is not infallible, and sometimes it will lead you astray. Steven Spielberg is a brilliant director, probably the greatest of all time. But that intuition that led him to make Schindler's List, E.T., Jaws, also led him to make 1941. Your intuition and following that intuition will not create a perfect film every single time. But if you don't follow your intuition, you will end up making someone else's film. And if that's the case, let them make the film. You go take a nap. So I'm going to go back to my quiet place, my peaceful place, and ask these questions of myself and allow myself to respond intuitively. I'm going to ask myself, what is this scene really about? Who is this man? Who is this woman? From whose point of view will the scene play? What's the first image? What's the last image? For the sake of time, I won't go into great detail about how I answered all these questions, but I will share with you part of an email that I wrote to my lead actress, Jessica, to help share with you how I interpreted a lot of these elements. This is a husband and wife the day after a huge fight, which ended with the wife storming out. But I like the idea that the husband is at fault and they both know it. In this scene then, the husband is returning home from work and not expecting the wife to be there. I like the idea that the wife's high is an olive branch, this invitation to begin the road to healing, and the husband's high is him humbly accepting that grace. But now, after the introspection, after the looking outside of myself, after the responding intuitively, it's time to do it. It's time to do what too few of us have the guts to do. So let's go. I'm gonna take the leap. I'm gonna go shoot this thing. And I'll come back and I'll share with you afterwards what I thought about the whole process. And ultimately, if it was able to do for me what I'm hoping that it's able to do for my students.
Very smooth. The next version of this will be my 6-year-old son doing the homework and seeing if he can do a better job than my college students. That's how movies are made.
And that is a wrap. Yes, this is where I always go after every film shoot, right here in front of my Blu-ray shelf to soak in the greatness that is behind me. The film shoot went really, really well. We went just a little bit over time, as often does happen, but I'm very pleased with the shots that we got and the performances that we got, especially from Jessica. Whoever else was acting in that thing, yeah, he was all right. Now I'm going to kind of fast forward through the editing process and now just jump straight to the screening of this little tiny short film here for you guys. So sit back, relax, take a breath, put on a nice pair of headphones, and enjoy. Hi.
Hi.
There you go. That was my version of Hi. Question is, did it actually accomplish what I was hoping that it would? And I can honestly say, yes, it did. It was so refreshing to take the time to be introspective, to ask myself what I really saw when I looked at this script, and to be unafraid when what I saw reminded me that I am indeed a hopeless romantic, that I am an optimist, and even while I have a number of friends who kind of roll their eyes at that side of me, I would be foolish not to see that in myself and know that that is part of me to my core, for better and for worse. But ultimately, like I said, if I'm not willing to say that's part of me, if I don't embrace that and put that up on the screen, then I should have someone else make this and I should go take a nap. Right? And then in looking outside of myself, I was once again reminded too that I tend to gravitate towards and really resonate with projects that also bear the marks of that sincerity. This particular piece of music that I put into the film was one that I've been holding on to for a little while now, because for me it has just this beautiful sincerity and vulnerability and tenderness, and I love that. And because I also challenged myself to shoot this entire thing in a very short amount of time, it also pushed me to respond intuitively. I didn't have time to second guess myself. I kind of just had to go with my first knee-jerk reaction. And then lastly, probably the main reason that I had so much fun doing this was because taking the leap is the best. It's the best. I love teaching, don't get me wrong, but there's nothing that beats getting behind a camera, lining up a shot, working with an actor or actress, talking to your cinematographer, and then editing that piece together and seeing the thing come to life. Taking the leap is a joy. So if there's any part of you that was inspired by this video and wants to complete this assignment for yourself and even send me something that you've put together after you've shot it, happy to look at those things. You should do it. Take that leap. And of course, it doesn't have to be this particular script, but in whatever script that you choose, you want to express your voice using the language of cinema. And how do you find your voice? Look inward, look outward, respond intuitively, and take that leap. Thanks so much, guys, for joining me on this week's I Did My Film Students Homework. I cannot wait to produce more of these, if only just because it means I get to take the leap again and again, and I am really looking forward to doing that again with you guys. Until then, though, have a good one. Cheers.